Davida.
We're the two Pilates Chicks, and as always, we have no idea what our theme music is, but I'm sure it's smashing. Smashing. We are at Season 5, Episode 8.
8.
Yes! And what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about old and outdated cueing.
Yes, and why it might not work well anymore.
And what we're actually trying to intend by those cues.
Yes. And we both have been teaching a long time. And we've been hearing a lot of cues for well over
a long time.
Some odd years. But yeah, we're not here to say, oh, that's so stupid, you shouldn't be saying that. It's just kind of maybe looking at cues and really, like we talk about, teaching to the body in front of you and understanding cueing in that way.
Yeah, and looking at these typical cueing, these token cues that have been taken as things that we all tend to say for certain exercises, and looking at why we say them, what our actual intention is.
What's going on in that moment that made you say that. It's kind of like when you when you hear yourself speak, like on a podcast, and you realize you say like or but or what, do you know what I mean? And it's the same thing when you're teaching. It's like, are you saying these things just because it's just this muscle reflex?
It's a habit.
It's a habit. Yeah. It's what you heard and have always heard. Or is it that you're really teaching to that body?
Yeah.
And what their movement is.
Why are you picking that cue? And sometimes we just say things that we've heard in the past to fill in the space. And we're not really thinking about what we're saying. We're just saying it.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of teachers where it's like, oh, I have to say something.
Yeah.
In this moment. I can't have silence. But you can.
Right. You can. And sometimes it's actually helpful to have silence. People can really kind of center in the moment and feel what they're feeling.
And think about it.
But it can be scary to have some silence in a class.
Yeah. Definitely as a teacher. But what we wanted to talk about is these outdated cues and we only picked 3, I think.
Yeah, we're picking 3.
Ones that you hear a lot.
Constantly.
Yeah. But they can inhibit movement. They can stop movement.
Yeah, and that's really why we wanted to talk about them, because there are certain cues that are very common that we find to be not helpful for the movement, because it is actually inhibiting the movement. There's an opposition happening between what the purpose of the exercise actually is and what the cue we're using is actually making the client do.
Yeah. And on that same kind of wavelength of the understanding of the client of what you're saying, because they're like, I'm not sure. And they're just going to go,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, are you feeling this here?
So we're not giving them any control, any autonomy. I have so much trouble with that.
Words are hard.
Words are hard, especially when we get into one of these cues. We'll see if we get through it.
So one of the main cues is keep the neck long.
Yes. And you hear this a lot in any of the extension work.
Yeah.
Especially the extension work, like swan and swimming.
Pulling straps,
T-pull, all of that. And I always thought, and I don't remember the teacher that told me this because we were asking about this cue, and it's kind of thinking back, well, someone probably said it to a client so they didn't crunch their neck or throw their head back. That's what I visualized, is someone just throwing their head back. So they say, oh, no, keep but yes, the neck is long to start, but then you have to have that neck go into extension.
Yeah.
Because then the hips can go into extension, the chest, everything can come. But if you just keep looking in that long kind of neck down, you're not going to come up.
Yeah, because when someone says keep your neck long, I think, okay, well, you're trying not to move your neck. That's
no
the
wrinkles
image.
back there.
Yeah, which then, if let's say we're on the long box and you're trying to get into pulling straps, so then you pull the arms back, you're keeping your neck long, but then you have to look up and forward, up the wall.
And up, yeah.
And looking up, letting the neck extend helps the whole rest of the body extend, which is the purpose of the exercise.
Right.
So if you're keeping your neck long the whole time, you're inhibiting extension because the neck can't extend. So then really your T-spine can't extend, because how's the thoracic going to move if
the hips
the neck's
can't
not
extend?
Yeah. So, and then it actually gets a little grippier if you're trying to get into the out extension while still looking downwards.
Yeah. And I'm going to share this story. Carrie Reeser, I hope she appreciates it. But I remember I was like working with her, and she was talking about extension and this whole neck long. And we have to be able to like look up at the sky. We have to be able to look at the planes, whatever. And she said, what if, when the dinosaurs were coming at us, we weren't able to like look up and back, right? It's like you have to be able to like do these moves. And that's the whole point of so I love that visual of running from a dinosaur, but being able to like look up and back.
Yeah. And we've said it before, but that's the whole point of all these exercises is like training the body to be able to do things.
Exactly.
And so why are we inhibiting movement in the studio? But in terms of like the specific exercise, if we're asking someone to keep the neck long in any sort of extension, we're just inhibiting the movement. We're not getting the full purpose or full expression of the exercise.
Yeah. And I think, and this is an old cue, and you were kind of using it earlier, and I heard it, gosh, way back when I was even a teacher, of like when you're down and picturing your nose pushing a ball, right? Mm-hmm. And so I heard that one where you push the ball and you keep pushing the ball forward, start looking up the wall. And then with Kathy Grant, it was the same thing of, the gaze and this and that.
Yeah.
But I don't know when that neck staying long kind of came into it.
Yeah, because we did used to hear the gaze, like where your
looking,
eyes go.
You're going up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Follow your eyes, and sometimes like the paintbrushes or a pencil.
Yeah, Kathy Grant had paintbrush eyes too.
Yeah, drawing up the wall, and following that line and keep following it as far as you can go before you don't crunch the neck back.
And it's kind of that same head going up and back, and not just like back.
Yeah. I often will say something about like length with lift. Mm-hmm. Like, so you're pairing those movements together if a client is either going too much of the back of the neck crunch or too much of keeping their neck inhibited. So it's like find the lift with the length. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the like gaze up the wall or looking up and following it is supposed to do.
Yeah. And if you think about our body and our spine, in flexion and extension, if the neck doesn't go into flexion, then the lower's not going to. And the same thing, if neck doesn't go into extension, then the hips get stopped. Mm-hmm. Or vice versa.
I mean, it's a whole kinetic chain. So everything impacts each other and follows each other. So in flexion too, and the same thing happens in crunches, right?
Exactly.
In flexion, people will say not to crunch the neck. But again, if you're coming from a supine position and you're trying to curl upwards, you have to
curl your neck.
The neck. Yeah. It just has to happen. So I think this fear of letting the neck move, we can let go of. And if somebody's dropping the back of the head back in extension or flopping the chin into the chest in flexion, then we can say like, okay, keep a little more length.
Then you
can
like cue in that moment, right? Yeah. Because you would cue in a way that would work for that person.
And that's the main point. Like, let's use a cue that person needs right now.
Yeah. Not the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one.
Well, not just saying keep your neck long because we've heard that and we're doing extension and we've heard that in extension, so we're going to say it in extension again. Like, does that person need it? Yeah.
And I think if, as teachers, and I remember there was some workshop I did, and I can't remember who the teacher was, but she was like, listen like to yourself as you're teaching and see if you are repeating and saying things and repeating things. And I think that's a good thing to kind of step back sometimes and look and say, ooh, am I giving like this cue to the same over and over? Mm. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes
it's not making a difference.
As teachers, you don't realize what you're saying sometimes.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're in a long day and you're just kind of, okay, next person, da-da-da-da-da-da, and just going through the routine.
Yeah. But I think that makes the way we were talking about our teaching to the body in front of you in those moments, it does take that away where it's not this like feeling of a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
All day long.
Yes. And it's better serves the client, but also for us in the middle of a long day, it's more interesting. Yeah. Like I get more invigorated when I'm like really connected in with what's going on.
Yeah. So neck long.
Yes.
Especially with like swan and things. And then we had, I'm going to try to say it. Are we ready?
Okay, try.
We've been practicing this because vertebra by vertebra.
Vertebra by vertebra.
Yeah. And for me, this is like, this is just one that I just heard in my own practice with my teachers, and I was like, that is just like, I fail. Because of course there's tight parts of your back and and there's just no way we can go down vertebra by vertebra as people.
Yeah. It just doesn't work in that way. And so now that cue, what it's trying to say, the intention is to, peel down through the spine as you're rolling back, smoothly articulate.
To really get into length as you're going down.
Yeah. And to maybe find those spots that are tight and try to articulate through them as best we can. So we're trying to work those tight spots. And, similarly, we hear the one like roll the spine down like a string of pearls. A string of beads. And it can evoke a good imagery, but again, it's like if the person has tight spots through their back, especially in the pelvis and the vertebra, like, clunk.
Yeah, because we all have that spot, right? When you're, especially, when you're starting the day.
Yeah.
and it's like
tighter.
And that's usually people have tight spots, and that's why we're kind of working through. But yeah, they're like, I can't here, I can't.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the thing is, structurally, maybe that's never, right? Because we're so curled in certain areas and extended and this and that. So it just doesn't speak well to the client.
Yeah. It
doesn't give them any power in terms of how they're figuring it out.
It doesn't give them anything to really work with. Instead, like, I think other good cues are like the Kathy Grant numbers that you've used.
I love the Kathy Grant numbers because everyone can figure out their own numbers.
Specific to that,
especially the lumbar area, because everyone's lumbar is different length.
Yeah.
Torso. So they figured that out. She also did like bands of colors, or the containers, like with
I like the containers. Yeah.
It just is easier for the client to relate to.
Yeah.
And to give themselves some, like, power over, these are my numbers, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. And then they go, it's really hard in that 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So it becomes this, like, this challenge instead of, like, I fail.
Yeah, I can't articulate every single vertebra.
Yeah.
But it is, it's asking for that smooth articulation. So what are other ways to ask for that? It's like, okay, maybe as they're doing roll-ups or roll-downs, like asking them to pause somewhere and find that tight spot, asking them to move
curl
slowly.
the hip a little more, or to, like, if you were using the numbers, curl 11, it's like whatever it is that they can, like, take a moment and go, that needs to happen.
Feel
for this.
it.
Yeah.
So maybe in the numbers, if you're like 7, 8, 9 are kind of sticky together, and you can kind of pull through it, but maybe it will never be an individual 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, and that's okay. But you're working through it, like you're giving them something where they're physically trying, so they are probably creating length. They're creating a pattern that's better than them just trying to figure out where their vertebrae are on their back and how they're going to hit every single one,
or just feeling like they're failing and just clunking and crash
down
through it.
Yeah. But I think it also goes back that it's cueing to that body in front of you and what it needs to hear, and how we can cue it in a way that gives them something that they can figure out.
Yeah, definitely. And I like, for that one, I'll sometimes say, like, peeling through the movement. If you're laying down, feel like you're peeling yourself back up, because you can kind of imagine something getting peeled.
Yeah, and that has a lot more to me, because you can think about, like, a Band-Aid or whatever it is. And that's not like,
each little each little spot.
And remember, Pilates is movement, right? So it's like, if we're so like, this by this by this by this by this.
So minute.
It's so minute. I was like, I can't speak. It is. And then it's like stopping again, their movement.
Yeah. And that's, exactly. So where are these cues inhibiting the client, and how can we change it for the person to help their movement and help them articulate, help them move through better.
It. Yeah. Yeah. The other one was, what was it? The ribs.
Knit your ribs together.
Yeah, knit your ribs together.
And this
I don't know
is a
about
big
y'all,
one.
but I am a huge rib popper. I always have been.
Me too.
But we do it differently.
Yeah. And yeah, that was interesting. As we were talking before, we were thinking about how we both have a rib flare, but our rib flares are different, where mine kind of anteriorly tips my rib cage container. And
mine just slides on forward.
You just kind of slide that container
So
forward
my
like
hips
a
and my shoulders are back there, and my ribs are going way out there. But I was always told, knit your ribs together. And the minute I did that, what's the other one? The crab, the claws.
Oh, the crab
claws.
Pinch.
Yeah, like the pinchers.
Like you're pinching your ribs together.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
Yeah.
But the minute I did that caused my pelvis to curl under and tuck under. And then I also collapsed in my lumbar. And so it didn't serve me well at all. But then working through like the Kathy Grant and all of this and learning, it's more of like just making sure you're stacked head, shoulders, ribs.
So all your containers are in a little tower.
Are perfectly stacked. And that changed everything for me as a student, and then also as a teacher and able to talk to the client in a way that, because maybe, like you said, maybe they don't bring those ribs all the way where you want them because they can't in this moment.
They just can't yet.
But maybe eventually it will. But learning, this feels different if I'm trying this. So giving them again some muscle memory to feel how things are working.
Like where they need to be drawing towards. And that's also more encouraging movement, right? Because you're like, let's bring the rib container back. And so you're drawing it back a bit so it's in movement. But as you can picture, I picture like a block, like a Jenga block, sliding back into the tower.
Exactly.
And so it kind of slides into the alignment without affecting anything else.
Exactly.
And for me, like when I pop my ribs, which then I have a big anterior pelvic tilt as well. So then both of those levels are tipping. And so then there's like a huge lordotic curve in my lumbar spine. And so it's like if I can start to just draw the back of the ribs wider, or think of that same cue of the container drawing back, that really helps that whole pelvic alignment and ribs and everything just kind of lengthens. And gets into place. That's
a really good point, because the whole, I'm going to say point like 5 times here. The whole reason is we're trying to get them to have length and movement, whether it's flexion, extension, and anything.
Yeah.
And so that's creating that instead of just, again, pulling something in a way that other things get off center.
Yeah, because the knit or the claw or whatever, like grabbing
it immediately
the front of
makes
the ribs,
you do this, right?
Like, it's like a little and it kind of squeezes and it feels contracting versus finding length. And so another cue I like for the rib thing is asking somebody to breathe into the back of their ribs. And that actually connects to like that posterior and lateral breathing of Pilates, or 360 breathing. And
360, yeah.
Yeah. And so that will, because what we're actually asking for is somebody to stop flaring the ribs open, but we want that so things get back into alignment, and so the back of the ribs open.
Yeah, because you want them to be in, it's like when you talk about alignment of somebody, and we're dealing with dynamic posture here. Yeah. And so it's kind of that same of like, okay, they're moving, so how do I get them to understand as they're moving where they are in space so that they're able to be in the best position, muscular and all of this.
Yeah, and as we're moving, like that posture is changing, right? That's why it's dynamic. And so where the ribs go, we want the person to be able to bring that container with them.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so it's finding the right alignment for that person. So if we're asking them to close the front of the ribs, which we want, but to close it, then again, we're contracting and shortening.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's like we want them to be able, like you said, to feel what's happening. And then when they go to all these different apparatus and different positions on their back, on their stomach, on this, they understand when you say, oh, where's your rib container? They can go, oh, because they know what needs to kind of happen, even though now they're in a different
position.
Orientation.
Yeah, totally. And we want clients to be able to adapt for all exercises and all positions, because then we take it outside and be able to move. But I think that's the main idea is so what are we actually asking for in this cue?
Yeah, and what is the purpose of the exercise?
And those two things, what we're asking for in the cue and what the purpose of the exercise is, those should be in alignment. If they're not matching, then the cue is not serving the exercise.
Right.
Which is not serving the client.
I mean, we're such Pilates nerds, it almost makes me want to make an assignment. Think of every exercise. And what are you asking for? Yeah. And what is the purpose?
Yeah. Oh, and we were thinking about earlier, so if we talk about that exact exercise, if we're that assignment, and we're
homework, people.
Yeah. So we're okay,
it's a neck long.
Yeah, well, we can use it in the neck long one, because that's a good example where it's so take a cue, that one of those token cues that we all use that are so overused that aren't serving us well. Take one of those cues, so neck long. Try that with an extension,
like swimming.
Yeah.
Swan.
Keep that neck long, keep looking down, really trying to pull the length in the neck, and then try the exercise with the full extension, drawing the gaze
eyes
up the wall.
Up, yeah.
Yeah, and try the different ones and just see how it feels different in the body and where the movement gets inhibited or encouraged based on the different cueing.
Yeah, because you will go further in your extension the more you can look up, 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 up.
Yeah.
And the more you can have your hips go forward, whether it's pushing into the mat or whatever, the box, whatever it is.
Yeah. And you can do that with, you're saying, every exercise where it's okay, what's a cue we commonly use that's just kind of root, said all the time, and
there's a lot of them that you hear over and over and over.
Yeah.
We just picked those 3.
Yeah, there's plenty.
Actually, feel free to DM or comment.
Yeah, what are the cues?
Send us an email, because we actually have a workshop in May.
Yeah.
That we're kind of talking on this, and we're going through exercises, and we're going to do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, which is the exact thing of trying to try cues in one way, try the exercise with those cues, try it in a different way, see how it works differently.
See how the bodies kind of change and adapt in ways that they couldn't.
Yeah, with the other cueing. And then also what is actually happening in the anatomy and movement in that exercise, and why the cues might not be helping the body move because of how the body works.
Yeah.
And what the exercise is asking for.
And I kind of think maybe a lot of times a lot of these cues came from we kind of go into it maybe later as in another episode, but the neck being long, people throwing their head in, this whole fear of your neck, right? And the whole curling and then really getting into that curl. Yeah. Is there became this fear of that, and then it became this way of talking. But in reality, science and updated kind of anatomy of our movement and kind of how our bodies are designed and that thought process, it's kind of it's not the best.
Yeah. The better, as we have a better understanding of kinesiology, the body and movement, and what we're asking the body to do and how the anatomy actually can move. Yeah. So again, with the neck long, it's the thoracic spine, if we're trying to do an extension, right, that means we're trying to extend the thoracic spine, right? But we cannot do that if the cervical spine doesn't move first.
If it stops, that's going to stop everything else.
So if we don't understand how the spine works in its anatomical function, how it moves, how it's structured, then we can't get movement. We can't move properly.
It's it's not going to happen.
It's stuck.
Yeah, and we're not it's just kind of thinking about these things in terms of why you're saying something to a client, what it is you're wanting from that client. And this is an individual client. It's not the same It's so funny because you hear your clients, well, I don't know, you probably do, I do, is my clients say, oh, you never said that to me before. It's like, well, I didn't need to cue that before. So if I was giving the same cues to them all the time, great. You know, they would be like, oh, yeah, I hear you. But it's like, you know, oh, you never told me that before. It's like, well, I never needed to before. It's a new day.
Today is necessary.
It's a new day, and we're focusing here. So I think it's a way to really take a look at, you know, what we're saying to the client and how they're connecting with it.
Yeah. Yeah. How you're connecting with the movement that you're teaching, how they're connecting with the movement you're asking them to do. What does the exercise actually, what is the purpose of it? And what does the cue invoke in the client?
Yeah. Because we need to think about that. What is their understanding?
Yeah.
Because how many of us have been in a class or something and the teachers, and you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
They say something and you're like, what?
I don't get what? I don't understand.
What was that cute? There's a couple of funny Instagram videos about that as a joke.
Oh, yeah?
I forget exactly what they were saying, but they were using all this flowery language of making fun of all the crazy cues that people use.
I remember you sent that one.
Yeah, and then like she's just saying all these things, and it's like, what do you want me to do? Say all this stuff, and you're like, okay, just push out.
Yeah. Keep it simple, people. Simple. Yeah, especially for me. But, so who is our sponsor?
Well, while we're recording this, it is our birthday month.
It's April, but it probably won't be April when they hear this.
No, it will not be. But
it is our birthday month.
In celebration of our birthday month, we are sponsoring Georgetown Cupcakes.
Yes.
And
they left us last year.
A couple years ago.
Was it last year or the year before?
I feel like it's been forever by now. We miss their cupcakes. And
so much.
Please come back.
Yes. And if you are Georgetown Cupcakes, or feel free to let them know. They're, you know, we'll take cupcakes. They can send them.
Gladly.
We'll tag them.
Cupcakes
we'll
and
eat them on the air.
They are the best cupcakes we've ever had.
And they do ship.
Yes.
We just...
It's all the way across the country.
All the way across the country.
Come back to LA.
Please. Anyway, that's it. That's our episode. Season 5, episode 8. Yep. Oh, and check us out on Instagram. Give us a follow at 2 Pilates Chicks, and our website, pilateschicks.com, where we have lots of fun things. Our workshop is up there. Yep. Our blogs, everything.
Everything.
Yeah. So thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Bye.